mindset control over attitude. With this week's communication line, we want to listen to what I've mentioned in our previous videos that are the governmental's responsibility in New Zealand, in South Africa, in Europe, to therefore acknowledge the mental state that countries that forms part of the same communication line are then acknowledged at, right? We want today to listen to the government communication office, where the government then have responsibility to acknowledge countries in poverty circumstances, right? The communication office that's built today in New Zealand, that are the offices that New Zealand's businesses are holding office on, that today acknowledge countries in poverty circumstances. Why do we want the communication line in all accuracy? Because when the communication line are accurate, then the people in poverty countries would find themselves communicating in a way that are well and that are fair for where they are at in their season, right? Saying that when the communication line in New Zealand are being monitored, are being communicated in all accuracy, then the communication acknowledges all people that are in New Zealand that forms part of countries that are sometimes in poverty. The reason why people are in New Zealand, the reason why international people are in South Africa, the reason why international people are in Europe, so that the communication line can become one communication line that are not only a telephone line, that are then therefore how we communicate being human beings. Today we look at countries in poverty that are in aggression. It means that the communication that they receive in their countries doesn't accurately calculate how fair processes in the country should be. In New Zealand, the country, the communication line are communicated in all fairness, in all accuracy. The same communication line, therefore, when it's transferred to a country in Africa, then it's transferred in a way that it acknowledges the fair responsibility that the same communication line has, that holds office in New Zealand, that are then therefore the communication line that are acknowledged in Africa. And it's not only acknowledged in Africa, no, it's acknowledged in all that we build office on, that 100% computerized communications that we are accessing in the heavens by the star communications, that includes the people in Africa. That includes why certain African people have been invited to New Zealand, right? It means that the communication that New Zealand holds has got information that relates to you, and the information has to get to Africa, because Africa does not have the computer. Certain parts of Africa does not have the accurate computer line there, and therefore New Zealand government have a responsibility to make sure that the mental wellness communication line that acknowledges New Zealand's wellness are the same communication line that acknowledge Africa in all accuracy, that acknowledge different parts of Africa, different countries in Africa in all accuracy. And therefore I want us today to only listen to the computerized communication that are 100% accessed in the universe, 100% accessed by the star communications, that acknowledges you, the person that are not born in New Zealand, but that have been called to New Zealand because the computerized communication acknowledge you on the journey. You are only in New Zealand and invited to New Zealand because the communication line that New Zealand builds office on have acknowledged that it's got information that belongs to you, and the information belongs to your country, therefore, right? And your country needs to build on it. And where it's at for me, Ribea Elise in the communication, today it's my Evoke business. The same communication line I've mentioned in the previous videos that are the hospital that are built in Ghana are calculated under the Mental Wellness Act communication line, but Ghana then have to have the same provision. Ghana then has to be provided equally under the communication line as to how New Zealand, in example, are provided for, right? How a first world country, in example, are provided for. When a first world country are 100% provided for in the communication line, in all the communications that relates to how we are mentally, physically, emotionally fine in our 100 years, then Ghana have a responsibility. When the hospital are built in Ghana, they have a responsibility under the Mental Wellness Act and under the Mental Wellness Communication Computerized telephone line to have a provided for country that have got all the right processes that they need to be well and to be well provided for. Therefore, I've mentioned a lot in our previous video, in our first video, that our mindset control over attitude, and I've explained it in a lot of different differentiations that we're gonna discuss it at, but I want us today to focus on the communication line, that are the mental wellness at communication line, that are calculating specifically directly in hospital communication lines, are therefore the same communication line that are under your Mental Wellness Act, the government's responsibility to make sure that countries are provided for, are mentally fine, are physically fine, are emotionally fine in their 100-year journey, right? So the same 100 years that today calculates in all accuracy, in all fairness, a 100-year journey for someone in New Zealand are the same 100 years that the African people that have traveled to New Zealand are acknowledged in the same 100-year communications. Their countries are acknowledged in it. The family lines in our international countries are acknowledged in it. When we have traveled to an international country, then we have a right to be acknowledged in our complete 100-year fair communication line, right? And not only the Legislative Court of Law would say, not only limited to the fact that we have traveled and that we have arrived in an international country, then the countries that were residing or where we were born in have to be acknowledged in the communication line now, but all countries are built under, first world countries are all built under the same 100% accuracy mental wellness communication line that are acknowledged in the Mental Wellness Act, that are responsible requirement for governmental leaders to adhere and to have fair processes in countries, and therefore third world countries have a right to be treated fairly in the same 100% calculation act, right? Let's say we today find ourselves in Africa. In the calculation act today are calculating not limited to Africa, but the complete computerized communication that are built in New Zealand. Then me, Ribea, in Africa today have to have all that I have to have the same communication that a Ribea person in New Zealand have got, right? A Ribea person in New Zealand today have got 100% communications that today provides for them in New Zealand, and the Ribea person in South Africa that looks the same like me, Ribea Elise in New Zealand, have a right to have all their 100% processes right in Africa in acknowledgement to the communication that were built on earth, not yet only acknowledged. The Legislative Court of Law says not limited to the fact that it was acknowledged in a first world country only, but in acknowledgement to the birth womb responsibility that the communication were already acknowledged in, right? And when we become responsible in the communication line, then the communication line treats us responsibly, right? And then we treat one another in a way that are responsive, in a way that are fair, in a way that are non-humiliative and non-oppressive, because it's a computerized communication, right? Because it controls so much of us in our journeys, because it controls where our journeys would be at the next day. It creates our journeys, the Bible says in Genesis 1. It creates our journeys. It creates Genesis 1 verse 1, Genesis 1 verse 2, Genesis 1 verse 3, Genesis 1 verse 4, Genesis 1 verse 5, Genesis 1 verse 6, me, Queen Ribea is the seventh baby in the womb, Genesis 1 verse 7. It creates and it builds while we walk our journey. And therefore, as governmental officials, as governmental leaders today, in the accuracy of the calculation office, that our tax officers, that our IRD officers, the Bible would say, the calculation communication responsibility have to adhere to in all accuracy. First world countries have to adhere in all accuracy to how responsible they refer communications through that belongs to countries that today find themselves in third world, in poverty or in aggressive circumstances, right? First world countries that have the 100% calculation act responsibility in a first world acknowledgement, today have to make sure that they refer the right communications to a third world country, and the third world countries don't find themselves so oppressed and aggressed. So because the third world countries' oppressions and aggressions can therefore relate to a first world country, it can therefore Today, when a third world country oppressed and aggressed, they can sometimes want to aggress and oppress a first world country. And therefore, under the responsibility of fairness, where we all have a right to have a fair, right journey on earth, the first world countries have a right of acknowledgement to acknowledge that the country that they hold office, that they built office on, the communication line that they built office on, have a right to be rightly acknowledged in all that they learn about other countries, right? The communication line that they hold in their country today have a right to be communicated thoroughly through to countries that also forms part of the same communication line, right? So let's say you sit today in New Zealand and you realize that the country's communication line have information that belongs to Africa. Then it's not that the Chinese government have sent it to your country on a computerized communication. No, it's an acknowledgement to the birth womb responsibility that the families on earth were once only this family, and then mankind were reborn, the Bible say, and then it was more people on earth. It's an acknowledgement to the birth womb responsibility. And when you realize that under the birth womb responsibility, countries in Africa have information that are sometimes only being accessed in your country or in New Zealand, the New Zealand government have a responsibility to ensure that Africa gets the accurate information that relates to different African countries. And it acknowledges today, in all that I educate on our birth womb responsibility, that I mentioned Queen Mom Universe, Anna George Philanderhoom, School of Color, Afrikaans Duitse translation journeys. It is how our families have journeyed over the years, where the communication lines were then therefore acknowledged in, and the communication therefore acknowledged us today. In Genesis 1 verse 7, me Queen Ribea the baby, and the Bible say not yet only the baby, because the communication then again comes through where I'm born at different parts in the universe, like how I'm born in South Africa, so the communication are therefore referred to and communicating to us in parenting, because we have learned that it's not yet a computerized communication. The Bible says it's not yet only spirit. We learn that it's different parts of creation. We learn that it's how we communicate in the universe, and we therefore, as governmental leaders, as parliamentary officers, as employee directors, have a responsibility to be fair and to be legislatively responsible in all that we learn about our office communications. And that is what I want to mention with mindset control over attitude. The responsibility that makes us responsive in times when we are in danger, right? Responsive means you prepare so that you don't find yourself in danger. And when you are in danger, then you realize how to react in a way that are protective and defensive for you. And it's equalized and calculated under the calculation act. There are the hospitalized act, there are the mental wellness act, right? And because it's calculated in all accuracy, we then therefore have a right to educate ourselves how to be responsive under a communication line that has got so much control over us that can sometimes be a computerized communication line, right? When the computer takes control of my complete human body and the computer makes me react and do this and do that in it, then I have a right to learn and to educate myself in all fairness. It's under the Human Right Act, right? In all fairness and responsibility, that I have a right to respond in a way that are responsive, right? In a way that when you go to sleep in the midnight and the computerized communication makes you sleep, then the computerized communication also have a right to wake you up, and you have a right to respond in it, right? The human brain communication that are being accessed by television, when Television America accesses it, like the Bible writes in Genesis 1 verse 7, by the star communications, then we as human beings acknowledge in our 100 years when governmental leaders do our television employment office right, and they do their mental wellness responsibility act right in all that we have to be responsible at, then in the next morning you will wake up so mentally well, physically well, emotionally well in your journey, and you would be ready for another 40 years, and you would feel it in your human body, and you would even tell it. Sometimes we tell it to other people, to someone else, and you say, but I feel so fresh today. It's the computerized communication that we respond at, that we learn to be responsive at, right? We educate on our Vogue Instagram videos to be responding in your season, right? The Computerized Act that I acknowledge under the Governmental Act, that I acknowledge under the Hospitalized Act, that I acknowledge in your Mental Wellness Act, right? In your mental wellness acknowledgement that your journey 100 years in mentally, physically, emotionally, you have to feel fresh for it in the mornings, right? And when your mind feels fresh for it, it's called mindset control over attitude. And when your mind feels fresh for it, then feels fresh for it, then television, governmental leaders have to have the right employees that does not fiddle with that part of your star communication, that are the brain communication, that controls your complete human body, and that therefore today became a computer in front of another human being. And your information are also on the computer. And when governmental leaders have people access a lot of information on the computer, then the computer has become so sensitive that there has to be codes and login codes. And when governmental leaders give access to officers to access information that are your whole complete human body in the universe by the star communications that American television educates us at, then we have to educate ourselves to be responsive. And how do we educate ourselves to be responsive? By educating about all the informations that we've learned on the journey, so that we can make sure that governmental leaders employ the right employees by television that access our communication in a way that are fair, and so that we educate the governmental leaders, recruit the right employees at the offices, and they educate the recruitment officers to employ employees that would not disturb sensitive information that are then therefore being accessed, and that therefore can access a complete human body information or communication line. And therefore today computers has become sensitive in our journey, right? I sound now like someone else that says in South Africa. Therefore today computers has become sensitive. Not anyone at Nibblebits. The people say they wanted me, Ribea Elise, to work at Nibblebits. And today I've learned why the people say so, because they cannot have employees work at the offices that would the whole time disturb the human brain communication. Because the human brain communication can be accessed through any computer in the offices. When governmental leaders in countries don't have control over the computerized communication in offices, then certain computerized communications can be accessed in a way that that anyone can log into a computer and can do this or that or that. Like New Zealand 6 p.m. News said in the year 2021, 2022, that Russia was hacking into the hospital computer. When all of those computerized communications are open, and when it does not have the proper access on, the proper access codes that allows only certain countries to be able to log in, and governmental leaders just want to leave it so, then it was not Russia logging in, then it's New Zealand government that was not responsible in the Hospitalized Act, that are the legislative act to be responsible at, right? And when we are in businesses and we fiddle today with those button keys, New Zealand TMPs, and we make a Queen Ribea Elise or Ribea Elise talk the whole day in New Zealand, and we access communications that are my human body communication, that are computerized communications that I have to Twitter so much and tweet so much on Twitter about, and then mentally you're like exhausting your computerized communication, like how I'm now talking like someone that feels exhausted under the communication line that are holding office in New Zealand, right? And when you're acknowledged in it and you're exhausting the communication line, and other countries are also acknowledged in it, and then other countries are going to be sensitive and they are going to say, let us travel in and let us come and manage our own communication lines. And when countries are traveling in, then New Zealand has to be right in all that they have given officers access to that are sometimes sensitive human access that can only be accessed through computerized office communication lines, right? Our office communication line are our womb communication line, how we are born in hospital at. In hospitals today, the computer stands next to the mama when the mama are giving birth. The complete star communication that were introduced to in American television are being accessed to when you give birth in a hospital. And when governmental leaders don't have control over those accesses and they want to make it out of control, then countries have a right to step in and to decide how to manage it in a way that are mentally, physically, emotionally fine and emotionally well for all people in the country, because we are all allowed to 100 years. We are all allowed to have a fair 100 years on earth. And while me, Ribea Elise, say in all my videos that my 100 years, hashtag 100, are my hashtag 100, and then I really don't want to laugh because it's the truth. And I really don't negotiate the fact, and it's the honest truth, and I really don't negotiate the fact that New Zealand are fiddling so much in my mindset control over attitude communication by making me talk so much in this New Zealand house. And that is where we want to be at today. We want to only focus on the Computerized Act that are acknowledged under the Hospitalised Act mental wellness communication line. That should be a controlled communication line, that should be under governmental control, that no one should go and press a communication button on that they are not meant to press on. Specifically, me, Ribea Elise, have given birth in Middlemore, New Zealand, to my first daughter, and I was the other day mentioning to New Zealand police, only because of all accuracy in accordance to legislation, you cannot fiddle so much in my communication line that it makes me shout so loud in my New Zealand house. The house's voice communication were such loud the year 2025, and it's not a joke. And I was referring to New Zealand Police Office a few months ago, and I was directing them to Middlemore communication line in acknowledgement to all that I experienced in this house, that I have never had South Africa access so much of my communication line that it makes me so aggressive, that normally I would get aggressive when someone aggresses me, right? But in this New Zealand house, it's somehow that I wake up sometimes and the communication line makes me explain so much information only because of people that access the communication line. And the communication line I've mentioned to New Zealand are highly sensitive and high in acknowledgement because it's Queen Mum Universe and a George Throne communication line. And the amount of times that I had to say, New Zealand government, New Zealand police, New Zealand, the communication makes me talk so much and it makes me say so many words. And I only want to say this, and I'm normally a person that does not swear, and I've got so much swear words in my house's communication. The communication line are so kabooga bear, and mentally I then have to get up and make myself feel fine mentally, physically, emotionally under the communication line that holds office that I acknowledge in the Hospitalised Act that builds office in all that New Zealand are building, and that acknowledges all that other international countries are building. And therefore today, with mindset control over attitude, we only want us to listen to what I've mentioned now in the video. We only want us to acknowledge that to our legislative responsibility. I always call it in my legislative educations our legislative right. It is a right for governmental officials to do the communication right, and it's the right for employees to have a fair journey in the communication right, our legislative right. And when we are on the wrong of the communication line, then governmental officials can be imprisoned under the wrong. The South Korean president were imprisoned under the wrong in the communication line, because when governmental leaders don't react responsibly in the communication line, then the communication line aggresses countries. And therefore, under the legislative right that we all have a right to have a fair 100-year journey, and we have a right to then be responsible and to then respond in the communication line that all countries are then built on, that we are actually born in. And there are actually you in the universe. The computer then becomes you in the universe. That part of the computer, me, Ribea, and my evoke business. The other part of the computer, me, Ribea, and my evoke profile photo and my appreciate self photo. The other part of my computerized communication are that part of me in the universe. And because governmental leaders have been accessing so much about it over the years, we are only educating it on our evoke business cell phone media to show international countries countries, all that me, Queen Ribea Elise, have worked on the journeys communication, where the communication are at, so that countries that are acknowledging themselves in the journeys communication that says, but we have heard about Ribea Elise's journey education in her years, and that sometimes find themselves so much in discussion with my name in it, can see that this part of me, Ribea, are that part of me in the universe. This photo of me, Ribea, are that part of me in the universe. This part of me, Ribea, are the Lamborghini part of me in the universe. And in American television, it's introduced in a complete fashion education, just the same way that my sister Queen Antoinette educated on her fashion pages, that me, Ribea Elise, also educated on my fashion pages, right? Or me, Queen Ribea Elise, right? And when we acknowledge ourselves in the authority line that we are born in on earth, right? Then we learn to be responsible in all that we learn about our birth womb, and we also learn to be responsive. Because imagine the whole world, they realize that you are Queen Ribea Elise in the womb, and you don't realize it, and the whole world start to chase you 100 years so that they can get to the communication line. And America educates it on a daily basis, and only because of that we refer to our Queen authority line, that our Queen Mom Universe and a George Throne House are born on in these 100 years on earth, right? How the communication line have journeyed, how we are born in our Grandma Martha womb. The Bible writes our Grandma Martha name. The Bible writes our Queen Mom Universe and a George Philander name. The Bible says our Mama, not only a prophetical journey, but then in all acknowledgement, in all that Amir Ribea is also educated my business, Mama that educates wisdom, that educates insight, right? That educates the journey that are then therefore also before us. In accordance to all that we have then been introduced to, the Mom Universe part of the womb, Queen Mom Universe, and a George Philander womb, School of Color, Afrikaans, Duitse translation. I love saying it, and it educates me so loud. And I hope that all of you all will find acknowledgement in it. It's being honored in the American Celebrity Award ceremonies. Queen Mom Universe, Mom of Honor. Queen Mom Universe Honor, George Philander. School of Color, Afrikaans, Duitse translation journeys. My mama's brother, them, my mama's sister, them, they were only Afrikaans sprekend. And it's Queen Mom Universe, Honor, George Philander. And when you refer to the communication line, then it educates you about the journeys that the families have formed. And when you transfer the communication line into a computerized office, and then it exactly brings you in contact to the communication line in China, and then the Chinese government exactly sends me all my business journey information that I educate. And it's such a thorough communication line. When you refer to it in all that I'm educating myself, and I say in the house, Queen Mom Universe, and a George Philander womb, School of Color, Afrikaans, Duitse translation, and then the communication sends me so much information through. And it's a lovely educational journey. And it then protects you and it defends you. Yeah, like it's written in the Bible. Mindset control over attitude. This week, there are all that we want to say on it. There are all that we want to refer to when we discuss our mindset control over our reactions. How we have a fast day. How our fast day are also related under the 1+1 office to someone else having a fair 100-year journey, right? How we have a fair 100-year journey under the 1+1 office in all acknowledgement to someone else next to you that also walks a fair 100-year journey. And that is it. Mindset control over attitude with me, Ribea Elise.